Hello, Nancy. Before we get started, please introduce yourself, share your pronouns, and tell our audience a little bit about who you are and the work that you do.
So, my name is Nancy Peterson. My pronouns are they, them. I currently work as an accessibility specialist in disability services at Columbia Basin College, which is basically I help students that come in that have disabilities get accommodations, and that could be like speech to text or a desk that goes up or down or whatever they need, so that way they can reduce the barriers between themselves and their academic materials in the academic setting. So that's what my job is. And then also on the outside, I do a lot of activism and that sort of thing. So,
Fantastic. Thank you, Nancy. One of the things, and I think, accommodation accessibility are big conversations and concepts. And there are many disability employment providers or disability service providers who are listening. What do you think are some of the common misconceptions or even mistakes that a lot of disability providers do or make when it comes to accommodations and accessibility?
uh, I think the biggest one is that they believe that they're the expert.
Hmm.
When in fact, uh, it's the person that they are providing the services for that are the expert. And that's true not only for them, but also any doctor or any professor in a lot of ways. It's like when it comes to meeting this person's needs, they are the expert on them. And so when they share part of their truth with you, you have to be open and accepting of that. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to automatically, like, if they say that they want the moon, it doesn't mean that they're going to get the moon because maybe the moon is not reasonable. But if they say that they want to get to the moon, we don't tell them that they can't, because they are the expert on themselves and on their dreams. Um, and on the flip side of that is that students come in with the mentality of that we're just going to be some box checkers. And part of that comes from their own lived experience of working with people that have just met them and checked boxes. And so learning how to be part of that conversation is is definitely a skill, and knowing how to self-advocate. Because if people don't expect you to self-advocate, they're not going to be looking for your input.
Yeah, yeah, great. And one of the things that resonated with me in your session today, and how you covered and really beyond the accessibility understanding, but like really understanding, right? And one of the things you said was, how will we be responsive to that person's journey? So, what are some of the best ways, and you shared some of that just now, but what are some other ways and some of the best ways that people who are supporting individuals with disabilities be responsive to that person's journey?
Uh, don't minimize. Like, so if a student comes up to you, or any person, it could be a friend, it could be a coworker, comes up to you and says, well, my ADHD, is kind of making it hard to focus today. What you don't say is, oh yeah, my son has that. It's really a problem. But this person may have only gotten diagnosed like a year or two ago. And they're on that mission of rediscovery of, so all those years that I I was being told that if I just tried harder, I would be fine. And I knew I was trying my hardest. And it's like I really was trying my hardest and I wasn't being lazy. There were just things I could have been doing differently because, and then to have somebody compare you to their kid, it's like it's not the same situation. And so, um, the best we can do is to be open to somebody's truth in that moment, and that people are learning and relearning who they are every day.
Yeah.
And they might be transitioning from understanding of, okay, well, this is what I thought was going on, and apparently it's not. I've seen some comedians that, and again, a joke that I've saw that really hit me was like, yeah, all of these personality quirks I thought I had just turned out to be DSM-5 symptoms, because they'd gotten diagnosed with autism. So they were making a joke of like, I thought I was quirky. Turns out I was diagnosable. But this was them processing and trying to, we use humor for a lot of things. And so it's like that person could have been 20, that person could have been 40. And when you meet them, you don't know where they are in that and what they've learned that day. That might have been a game changer. So being open and being receptive and at the same time, just being present.
You shared about a person's truth and the accommodations for that person. And part of their truth and the accommodations and then kind of supports includes being a member of the queer community. And so they've shared that part of their truth with you, their disability, the accommodations they need, and also being part of the queer community. How do you encompass all of that in those kind of responses and supporting that individual with all of those intersecting um, parts of their truth?
So there is a group of drag queens that all have trisomy 21, which is used to be known as Down syndrome, right? So it's drag syndrome. That's what it is. So there is this group out there that is absolutely fabulous, and they're just amazing. Um, and so one thing that I might share with a student is like getting onto the same page as they are and just showing that, hey, cool, you have parts of your identity that are this, and you have parts of your identity that are that, and cool. That makes you a very colorful individual, and that's awesome. Do you have any people that you follow that are content creators? And I've got a few people that I follow that are content creators because that opens that conversation, that reciprocity aspect. Because I've got like lots of people that I follow through that are content creators, including like Drag Syndrome. Sorry, it took me a second to remember it, but Drag Syndrome, and they're absolutely they're fabulous. But there are a number of let's see, Candy Corn. It's spelled with Ourn, Crutches and Spice, right? There are these individuals that are part of the LGBT community and also of the disability community. And, as myself, I'm non-binary and I've got, a developmental disability in regards to like a brain thing where I'm an incomplete quadriplegic. So it's like, it's part of my identity. And so it's like, hey, cool, we're colorful. And there's other colorful things out there that are pretty awesome. So let's not just like acknowledge it. Let's celebrate it. Who do you follow? Let's share some of that culture because it is a culture, and that's to me it's an open door to a conversation to be fabulous.
Mm, great. So with that in mind, right? If someone comes to you or approaches you or any prevent, and you talked about how do we support someone, if someone chooses not to disclose some of their accommodations or support needs, how do you recommend that the people listening support someone without that specific information? How do you create those kind of tools, resources, environment that can have the person be fully supported without really knowing what they need?
So one thing to do is figure out what part of the environment that you're in can be flexible. So, for example, in my office, the lighting is not mandatory. I am allowed to adjust the lighting of my office without asking permission, which you would think would be kind of a small thing. But for some people, it's like, oh, but we all have to be this way. Why? Like, if it's not mandatory, it's like, why can't you make certain things adjustable? Because then you might have somebody with a disability that is triggered by certain lighting that they're like, hey, without drawing attention to it, I can just use nothing but lamps. Cool. Because if you're wondering if you have people that are a part of the LGBT community in your environment, the answer is yes. If you didn't know, the answer is yes. If you wonder if you've got people with disabilities in your environment, the answer is yes. It takes a lot of emotional work to be us. Um, uh, and when those things are together, then it takes an extra lot of work. And some days we're just too tired to carry the emotional labor that is having to speak up on behalf of the rest of us. So, like if I'm reading something in the news, or if I'm seeing a microaggression or whatever, you know, if one of my coworkers that is not part of that population chimes in and does that emotional work instead, and it's done consistently, that's fantastic. So consistency is the key. So, finding out like, all right, what are the things in the environment that can be flexible? Finding out how we can be consistent. Um, taking microaggressions and just squashing them. And again, doing it all the time. Um, and somebody may never choose to come out because that may not be one part of the identity they have when they're at work. That's their business. And it may not be, necessary to be part of it. Maybe they just don't need help when they're there. So there's no need to share until it becomes a problem. And at that point, damage may already be done in the relationship.
Oh, thank you. So you just shared some great tips and ideas, and there are still many people out there who are not very familiar with, providing services, creating employment opportunities for people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, and they want to learn more. What's the best way they can learn more? You shared about, know the community, provide resources. What are some other ways that they can learn more because they want to do and they recognize that it is emotional labor for people to continue to have to do that. How can they learn more, do more, be better at it?
Um, so I'm going to say an answer that's not always that popular. But one, social media. And part of that is I want you to chase after growing pains. Um, because the areas that you are like, oh, that's just different. I want you to research the crud out of it. The first time that I ever met an openly transgender friend, and they were part of a community that I was not familiar with, I was just like, that makes me a little moderately uncomfortable because I'm not familiar with it. So I researched the crud out of it. It was like, I want to sit with that discomfort because the only thing that made me uncomfortable was my lack of awareness that I didn't, because from the outside it was like, ooh, I wanted, so I chased after my growing pains, and I didn't expect that person to sit down and like do the work for me because that would have been getting into their personal space. So I went and I hunted out other resources. And then that way, when I had a conversation with them, if I did ask them any questions, they would be intelligent conversations. And with the understanding of I'm not coming because and asking you these questions because I'm nosy. Because I want to understand more. Um, because the fact that they had shared that in the first place that was that might have them just been filling me out to see, all right, are you gonna run from this? Or can I be real with you? So chasing after growing pains, looking and being aware of what other content is out there, and then being aware that people around you may be putting out feelers and saying, are you someone I can trust or not?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think sometimes people are afraid to be uncomfortable because but I think we understand that growth comes from that. So thank you for sharing that, Nancy.
Kind of like
And
going to the gym.
say that again.
It's like going to the gym. You know, you've
Yeah,
done something right when your muscles are sore the next day. You
I
know?
love that analogy. Then you know you've done the work.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's
Yeah.
like, but then after that, it's just like you start to become hungry for it because you start to realize that, hey, I mean, do you hear about gym culture? Well, you go out and get those growing pains in other places and you get to all sorts of making new friends. So,
Great, 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 great. In this conversation, and we've had several of them, but the one thing that continues to be a thing is that people recognize that the members of the LGBTQ community have disabilities and that there's more to be done and how we support that. Is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners today about how we just, move in these spaces and it just I want to make sure that we give you the opportunities beyond my formulated questions, right? What would you just bits of wisdom from Nancy Peterson? What is something that you want the people who are listening to really, really get?
so uh, those of us that are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The idea that all right, there's these baselines of needs that need to be fulfilled along the way, and then once you get to certain levels, then you can like almost like next level in a video game, right? Um, when you have a disability, uh, the importance on the lower levels is increased so much that it infringes upon the right to reach the higher levels. The glass ceilings are so thick. And you can't break glass ceilings without getting cut. And that's why I look around and it's like I'm an incomplete quadriplegic, so I've got paralysis throughout my entire top to bottom in some respect. I had the number of times I've had to relearn how to walk or, use a fork, still can't write by hand. But it's got, we've got 4 college degrees. And yet I don't know anyone else at my level of employment that's like me, despite the fact that I am absolutely able to do my job. Because people such as myself are told, oh no, focus on these lower levels. It's like, but I got that level. And one of those areas that gets left out, especially those with developmental disabilities, is areas of intimacy. And because people take on a paternalistic attitude towards others in a way that is not at all complimentary. It's like, all right, I don't need you to be paternalistic. I just need you to get out of my way. You're just, it's like, if we get hired for a job, it's like, what am I? I'm not a mascot. I'm here to lead. Oh, you don't want that. Okay, well then we have a problem now, don't we? And then you end up running into again that glass ceiling, and you don't break glass ceilings without getting cut or a really bad headache. And so we need to have a more equitable understanding of that hierarchy of needs in terms of individuals with disabilities and kind of zoom out because we are zoomed in way too much on the lower levels and it's taking away the opportunities to hit those self-actualizations, to hit those levels of intimacy, to hit those levels of leadership. The fact that only 40% of the disabled population is employed and that, 70 cents for every dollar made. Um, and that at the same time, the level of that discrepancy increases the more education you have. So if somebody has a master's degree and a disability, the wage discrepancy is actually more than if they have less education compared to somebody with that same amount of education. You think it would change, but it doesn't. The glass ceilings get thicker the higher you go. So understanding that and being aware of that, and then if you are in a position to, you know, recognize what's going on, you start moving some of those glass ceiling panels out of the way and you start having a more equitable look on that hierarchy because we are getting left behind.
Yeah. And nobody wants to be left behind. So, Nancy, finally, how can people connect with you and learn more about you and your work?
So I am at Columbia Basin College in Pasco. We have a very robust program here. You can reach out to me there. If you want to talk just more about activism in general, I'm also available at mx.nancy.peterson@gmail.com. But yeah, so I have a very awesome team that I work with here, and that a very supportive environment, as I said. And CBC in general is an awesome school. I mean, yeah, and I'm not just saying that because I got the little on their Wi-Fi because they really are pretty awesome. Uh, but yeah, so if you want to reach out, I'm the only Nancy on campus, which is quite handy. It hasn't been a popular name since the 1940s. Um, and otherwise, thanks for listening. This has been a really awesome opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And we appreciate all of the tidbits of information, and be well.